I saw that there was two members in the instance already, but I forgot that Ricky Ricordo is one of the regulars. Ahoy, Scott.
Hey there.
I have
Hey.
become a plant. I have grown
Beautiful.
roots deep into the earth.
I was on mute for a second there, so sorry I couldn't respond. I try to make sure that me taking my headset on and off doesn't like spam the audio for everyone. You know what I mean?
Ah, yeah, gotta get the thing sorted.
Yeah, getting the streaming going.
I suddenly had a random thought. I haven't had a corn dog in a long time, and now I want a corn dog. But I've never had a
It has
vegan
been a
corn
while.
dog before, and now I want to try a vegan corn dog.
Oh, I wonder what brought that to mind. Being a
Well, since
plant?
I am, yeah, since now I am now a plant, this is the closest thing to being a cannibal. In a tragic twist of irony, while I'm still not a carnivore, eating my own kind is now quite morbid.
Yeah, there's some moral quandaries there. Being a potted plant and
That consumes other plants. What is dirt but just the rotting bodies of all my ancestors?
yeah, take a take a trip down YouTube search lane and put in like the seedlings like reaching for the sun, like time lapse photos. and what you'll see is plant warfare to get the sunshine.
Oh,
Keep trying to
yes.
grow higher than each other, and they sprout leaves to cover the other one, and it's pretty gruesome when you see it
Yeah.
in time lapse.
I just noticed the cottonwood plants or the cottonwood trees are shedding their seeds all over the place. And then
Oh,
it
it's
almost looks like a
starting.
little bit of snow, which is kind of pretty, but the seeds are so
Yeah,
tiny, like
I know, right?
incredibly small, and they grow up into these massive trees.
Yeah, cottonwood's like, I think I'm just gonna make this whole forest cottonwood. It's got quite a reach. And if you happen to have an air conditioner around a cottonwood tree, like, yeah, gosh, help you. Hey, KT, good to see you.
Hey,
Howdy.
howdy.
I am a plant now.
You're what?
I am now a plant. I've grown roots,
Ah, I
went
see.
deep into the earth, and
Yes,
now
I see.
feed myself through photosynthesis.
Oh, how cool. Looking for the warm sun. Around my place, you wouldn't find it much, though, because we've had rain coming and going. It has been sunny and then cloudy and then sunny and then cloudy. Starting to get whiplash.
Oh,
Welcome, Sim.
jeepers. Mother Nature's having mood swings.
Yes. However, the grass likes it, so you might like it.
Oh, yeah. It makes it very easy to drink when it falls right on top of me all day. I am now a plant simulations. I have grown roots and been buried, and now I live off of the earth and the water and photosynthesis.
I'll give it just maybe 1 minute more or so, and we'll get us kicked off.
Squirrels are my worst enemy, though.
Ooh.
Every time I make seeds and scatter them all over the place, the squirrels just take them and they bury them and then they eat them. You know what it's like to have all your children eaten by squirrels?
Terrible. Very terrible. But
So I
have you
bite
seen
them.
goats?
Next time I see a squirrel, I ain't gonna let go.
Have you
Goats?
seen any goats? They're worse.
I'm gonna have to bite those extra hard.
Yep.
I think we can go ahead and get started here shortly.
That reminds me, I wonder how hard a Venus flytrap actually bites. Like, I get the feeling it wouldn't even hurt a human. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something.
It's the
I'm
acid
curious
in its
about.
mouth that would hurt.
Right, but I wonder if it's even strong enough, like, to do anything to human skin. Now I'm curious.
I have no idea. I don't have my phone handy, or I would Google it.
Well, if everyone
Yeah.
is in a good spot, I'll go ahead and kick us off for this week. And, say welcome to another event of the Body Keeps the Score book review, our weekly get-together to review another chapter of the book.
Hey, Scott, just don't kick me. I am not a football.
I will definitely look out for that. And welcome, Teska. It's nice to see you. I'm glad you could
Hello.
make it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just want to extend a heartfelt thanks to everyone that took time out to come in and join us for our book review of Body Keeps the Score. I'm kind of excited for this event because this is where we turn to the part of the book that's about healing. If you've experienced trauma in your life, these are techniques that Dr. Vanderkolk found to be effective in cases that he's managed. And, also want to throw a thankful shout out to anybody watching on the streams live. or, picking up a stream after the event. Would love to see any comments from the streams as well. If you have questions or comments, I'll read them off real time here, so you can participate as well. And since we do discuss a pretty heavy topic in this event, I'd like to present a few norms to keep the event, safe and comfortable and productive. First of which is, we're not here in a capacity of professional therapy. I like to describe us as kind of like peer-to-peer learning and sharing, mental wellness enthusiasts. But not professionals. We're not here in a capacity where we could manage crisis and that kind of thing. So if it comes to that, we might direct to a crisis hotline or see if we can line up with a professional. So please give us some feedback in that regard. If you're experiencing some triggers from the event, like to know and see how we could help. And along the same lines, please no fixing or advising. So in some cases, someone might have comfort to share something for the very first time, and it can be stifling to have a group of people offering advice like right out of the gate. So, but if you do want advice about something or have questions, by all means mention that to the group. I would like feedback. And, I and you statement hygiene is very polite in here, in a sensitive, area. It might be hard to hear something like, you said this or you made me feel in this way. It can feel very judgmental. So try to soften statements if we get into some sensitive areas. We do practice confidentiality. We're not here to collect information to share. We do, however, stream the event to try to, help create like a wider access to the topic. So be mindful, that we're streaming. If you have something that you want to share but don't necessarily want it to be on the stream, my DMs are always open, or reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear. But also, if you do have something that you'd like to share, I'm sure the people on the stream or watching after, would love to hear your thoughts on the topic as well. When we get to open discussion, we have a raise hand feature. Off to your left there, there's a big squirrel picture, and if you click that, it puts your name up on the board. So that I know you have something to share. And there's also an X button if you change your mind. If you're like, wait a second, I'm thinking twice about, sharing this right now, feel free to click the X button and that'll take your name down as well. And lastly, we do have a Discord, which is part of the stream board over there, where we have discussions about Body Keeps the Score, throughout the week. We can have chats in Discord, and if you're interested, you can join in, there on the Discord. So an exciting part of the book to jump into, where we're going to start to discuss healing. So the first two sections of the book, or two parts, maybe is better description. We kind of learned the mechanics in the biology of trauma, of how it sort of rewires the nervous system and the brain and the body to be very reactive and kind of overreactive in situations that, compromise our problem solving and creativity and just a general ability to stay calm. And from there, we went into parts where Dr. van der Kolk shared a lot of, research and findings and statistics, and also a lot of anecdotes of, patients that volunteered to share their stories in the book. And now that we have a lot of that information in our pockets, Dr. van der Kolk would like to explore, where do you go from here? Now that you have an understanding is there a path to kind of a wellness after trauma? How do we start the path of healing? And in the first part of the chapter, he kind of reminds us that the trauma, the thing that happened that caused the trauma, we don't have the technology to undo that, right? You can't go back in time. You can't change the past. But the good news is the trauma that you experience afterwards is not really the event. Like, the event has bookends. It started and it finished. What you're actually looking for is the imprint that experience created on the body. Like, how did it wire our body to react to different situations? Kind of what we call hypervigilance is this constant like radar or awareness of, is the thing that hurt me in the past like in the room with me now, so to speak. Kind of a funny way to describe it, but that's how hypervigilance works, is this attunement to what's happening around you in the context of, is it dangerous to me? And if you think about it, that can be very exhausting, right? Paying attention to everybody's movement or words or sounds. And what it does is it causes that fight, flight, freeze, fawning trauma response, which is you're kind of like older. We talked about how we had this evolution of almost two brains, where if you go all the way back in our history, we have this kind of animal like lizard brain that, a more complex problem solving center like evolved on top of. Well, when you have a fight or flight, freeze or fawning experience, it's like you're sort of giving up that evolved problem-solving rational brain, and you're going back into your animal brain, and it grabs the steering wheel, and off you go into whatever it decides to do. And the exhaustion that comes from all of that, but the loss of executive function, this is where you hear people describe being broken, having the inability to make good decisions, being stuck in patterns. That's easy to happen when you lose like that rational side of how we think. And also we talked about dissociation too, which is the very extreme result of horrible abuse, where the mind has a defense mechanism of really just dividing into, reality versus non-reality, and kind of create these gaps in our memory or completely different narratives than what happened. And those can be very difficult cases to heal from, because you have to regain the truth, so to speak. And those traumatic memories, how they're non-linear and kind of almost like flashcards that don't make any sense, that come along with dissociation. And lastly, one of the really difficult parts of having a type of trauma is it can be very easy to develop a shame around it. Like, you were kind of the recipient or the victim of this terrible experience, or just this random accident that, you didn't deserve to have happen to you. But there's a shame that can develop over it, that, I have this thing that I have to keep to myself and not like burden other people. And, also the things that you've had to do to survive that experience, can also bring shame. Did you have to avoid people? Did you have to fight people? Did you have to steal something to eat that night? Those are the kinds of things that come, with shame-oriented experiences after trauma. And, Dr. van der Kolk kind of reminds us that these are all methods that, described in the book that he's prescribed himself. So, these aren't like ideas or opinions, these are things that he's clinically like administered, which I find interesting. This is like a really comprehensive list of things he's seen work. And this chapter is also kind of a high-level summary. He's going to dive into these methodologies like in more detail in the next chapters. So kind of consider this almost a summarized version, and then we'll do the deep dives as we go. Some of these he's practiced himself. Remember, he's also experienced trauma through his family and through experiences in World War II that he's worked on healing from. And he's also published these findings in peer-reviewed science journals. So you can really dive into these in a scientific way by going back through publications. But like in the earlier chapter, Dr. Vanderkolk, he reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all for healing from trauma. That's what makes it so challenging to find a pathway through it, is healing techniques like work differently for each individual. Sometimes you'll find one technique and boom, like that's the secret. You've unlocked the path and there you go. Sometimes you try something, it has absolutely no effect, or maybe even the opposite. Maybe it made it worse. But sometimes, or maybe even oftentimes, it kind of takes a combination of these things for each individual. So that's kind of the challenge there, is how to find which techniques actually help for the situation that you found yourself in. And stressing the importance of safety in healing from trauma. Remember, trauma is a result of something that made us feel horrendously unsafe, like life-threatening, or the direct possibility of harm, of great harm, bodily harm, mental harm. So if you're still in that environment, if you're still in an abusive relationship, or you're still homeless, or you're still being, beaten at school, if you're still in these traumatic situations, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to heal, like while you're experiencing it. So one of the aspects of trauma is like you sort of have to find a way to endure it and escape it, and then create that space from it so you can start healing. So, very difficult to do while you're in the environment itself. And that's why I really love Churchill's, or at least the statement credited to Churchill, whether or not he said it. I love the statement, if you're going through hell, keep going, because the pathway to healing is on the other side of that journey. But the importance of supportive communities, I can't really underscore how helpful and important it is to find community support. And the other side of healing too is like the difficulty in trusting impermanence. Like our minds have a hard time with forecasting the future, and part of the reaction of trauma sort of takes your ability to abstractly think about the future and the past. And it can feel like this is never going to end. Like when you're in difficult situations, your brain can convince you that nothing is ever going to be, anything but just like this. And, learning to trust that things change, that things aren't always the same, they aren't always going to be the same. That's a really important aspect to going through this healing journey, is trusting that it can change. So kind of first step is like, how do you recognize that you have trauma when trauma compromises your ability to recognize that you have trauma? That's one of the most difficult parts of having trauma, is the coping and the trauma behaviors and the compromised like mental faculties. These all make it difficult to kind of stop and assess and reflect. But you can get the professional diagnosis, if you have access to therapy, medical doctors, mental health practitioners, they can help validate whether or not, what you've experienced is trauma, if it's having lasting effects. But if you don't have that access, these are some kind of signals, chronic fatigue, like zero explanation, always feeling tired. Uncomfortable dreams, I'm sure all of us have the occasional nightmare. But if it's just constant and never ending dreams that are difficult to process, or, you kind of wake up and you're still uncomfortable, that can be a sign. Addiction, in and of itself is not a guarantee that you have trauma, but one of the coping mechanisms of trauma is manifests as addiction. Chronic mystery illnesses. This is a really tricky one too, like tension, headaches, migraines, fibromyalgia, hypertension, eczema. If you sort of like have this really clean bill of health, and you don't really have a family history of illnesses, but you're constantly just dealing with these nagging aches and different chronic things that keep coming back, that can be a sign of like the actual physical burnout of the trauma, manifesting in parts of the body, like breaking down. And, that's your body's sort of symptom of that there's something under the surface. Excessive behaviors and relational patterns. Do you have some type of, difficult relational situation you kind of find yourself keep experiencing? Or some type of behavior that's like, like going out and finding people to race, with your really fast car. These aren't like smoking guns of I have trauma, but if you kind of add everything up, and it's really unhealthy and obsessive, that's kind of leading into the next one, is the obsessive dwelling, like the inability to stop thinking about something, to stop thinking about a memory. And self-gaslighting, our ability to lie to ourselves, like everything's okay, or that didn't happen. That's a huge disconnection that sort of fuels trauma, continuing without a break. Intense reactions to certain specific situations, every time, you see like a specific breed of dog, or somebody's wearing a plaid shirt, like this brings a really emotional reaction. And then the inability to regulate it, to kind of dial it down, it sort of overwhelms and stays and changes your whole mood and day. That's can also be a sign. The inability to say no and set boundaries. Like if somebody asks you to do something, even though you don't have the time and the energy, like, are you always saying, yes, I'll do that? Are you always committing to it? Like jumping into commitments, or maybe the opposite, like being completely averse to commitments. So no single thing here is like, I have this, therefore I have trauma. But if you kind of add these details up together, it can be a sign that your body is continually experiencing this like emotional deregulation, due to some past experience. So if you do kind of find out that you have some sort of trauma, it would be helpful to explore and dive into and process and start healing from. A great place to start, where it really helped me, was the limbic system therapy. And I'll also give a shout out to Nolan there too. Thanks for spawning in and joining us. Great to see you. So as we talked about, like the reaction to traumatic triggering sort of starts with the limbic system. Our amygdala it kind of triggers the body to produce all of this stress hormone and cortisol and adrenaline, and it puts us into this sort of body reaction for fight or flight. It shuts down your rational brain. We don't need that to fight. We don't need that to run. It just pumps your body up with all of these hormones to be as fast and as strong as possible. So, that's why it's important to try to gain control of these traumatic triggers, because you want to keep your rational wits, about you if you're not really in a situation that you have to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn to survive. So the limbic system, this kind of older animal brain that we had, many, many generations ago, like prehistoric, back when we were, before we were on two legs and things, that steals all of your functionality, all of these problem solvings and rational skills, from your frontal lobe. So what can happen is, if you can practice this, if you can start getting in front of this reaction, you can start getting the limbic system to calm down and to not go all the way into these states. It restores like your executive function, your ability to think and make decisions and problem solve. And also Dr. van der Kolk talked about creativity, how important it is to have your creativity, because in order to think about something changing or being different, it takes that creative brain to sort of visualize, that you're not stuck. Things can change, and trust that. And this concept of introception, too, is another thing that traumatic experiencing takes away, which is the ability to feel like what you're feeling. So it's kind of a hard concept it's a little abstract. Obviously you always feel what you're feeling. But, instead of just like letting the feeling, guide your actions, like actually being able to reflect and analyze, like, what does this feeling mean, and where is it coming from? If you're able to get the limbic system more calm, you can start to ask yourself, these questions, like, what is it that kind of spooked me right there? Where did that emotion come from? And, reconnect the mind and the body. Dr. van der Kolk has all of these anecdotes in the book where, people's mind and body were like operating on two different frequencies. And if that's disconnected, it opens the door for all the symptoms we just talked about. So being able to calm the limbic system and try to start dialing it down from being so overreactive, from having that survival experience, you can begin to call on, what is almost a superpower, which is using your frontal lobe and your rationality and your creative mind to start having this self-awareness of what's actually happening in the body, and reconnect the mind and the body, for that purpose. So once you can quiet the trauma reaction, that's what opens the door. And I'm not sure if this metaphor will land, but it's almost like, an actor, director, producer role. Like if you're an actor, mostly you're constrained to reading the lines and acting the motions that are in the script. Unless you're a really big household name actor, you're probably not going to be able to tell the director you want to say something different or do something different. But if you are the director, now you have access to the script, and now you can change the scene and the dialogue and who's there. So this practice sort of gives you that like graduation from just being an actor or a reactor in life, and to start having the presence of mind for guidance and self-determination and discernment. If you can hit that producer level, that's where you can start making the 10-year plan, right? Like, where do I want to be in 10 years? So when you can create that space by calming the limbic system, which is where I was fortunate enough to be able to key on, once I read this book, that was what really opened the door for me, was like understanding the process of traumatic triggering and reaction, practicing my way of calming out of it so it didn't go like all the way, and then being able to reflect on it. I was able to keep my executive function and start making, better rational decisions and choose better behaviors. So, techniques for doing it, like how do you calm the limbic system once it's, ran away with the package? It's really hard to not fully experience a traumatic trigger, like once it starts and takes hold. Usually we'll go through our pattern and until we have enough time to sort of come out of it. But one of the beautiful things about our body is we have this vagus nerve that connects from our brainstem to every like vital organ in our body, our lungs, our gallbladder, our stomachs, our intestines, our skin, like feeling touch and heat. All of these sensory feelings are traveling, through our organs into the vagus nerve and going up into our brain, telling us, what's the state of things, what's going on. And 80% of those connections are from the body to the brain. So it's like this sort of one-way track from your body straight into your brain, and what you can do to kind of leverage that biology that we have is things like breathing or chanting. Tapping is also like a form of communicating with your vagus nerve and body. Making a choice to, with intention, calm out of some type of a stimulation. And why that works is like our body's programmed, with adrenaline and cortisol to, have shallower breaths, our hearing changes, our heart rate like increases. We have all of these biological responses to a trauma trigger. But what a deep breath can do is like your body can't be in an emergency situation if you're taking a deep breath. It's like it tells the amygdala that beyond a shadow of a doubt there's no danger, because otherwise you couldn't actually mindfully take a deep breath. So that sends this signal through your vagus nerve up to your brain, and your amygdala, it can be like, all right, the situation has come and gone. Now I can calm things back down. And chanting, there's like all kinds of chanting techniques, tapping on certain points of the body, especially like the neck and like behind the ear. These can help tell the body through the vagus nerve that nothing's wrong. Like stop freaking out. Like we're good. I got this. And from a scientific standpoint, there's studies that show that these, very simple bodily functions, if you practice, they actually have the same results as a lot of medications, like a Xanax or a Wellbutrin or something, that goes directly after these, depressive moods or different mood disorders. These little biological hacks actually have like a similar effective way of getting out of that mood. Purposeful movement, this one might be kind of surprising, but this has an enormous effect on trauma. And it also, there's a global recognition that this is good for not only physical health, but mental health. Things like Tai Chi in China, Qigong. Africa, we talked about rhythmic drumming earlier in an earlier chapter, where veterans found healing socially through drumming circles. And of course, yoga. Is there anything more famous in the Western society than yoga? Very trendy, movement-oriented exercise. But, movement can really be attributed to the physical sensation, but it also has mental, aspects too. There's this fiber in our bodies called a fascia, which is almost like this webbing that forms between our tissues and kind of around our organs. And if we're in a sedentary position, like sitting in a job, a computer related job at a desk, day in, day out, that fascia can sort of like harden and solidify almost like a plaque. So if you do regularly do these stretching exercises and go out for a walk and do these purposeful movements, what it does is if you see those yellow areas on the body diagram, these like fascia areas of the body, they sort of refresh and like bake and, get blood flow and restore themselves. They get unstuck, sometimes they get wrapped around and kind of create stiffness and aches. So, things like yoga and Tai Chi are specifically designed to like unwrap these fascias and make our muscles less stiff and, have less pain. But it's also, what it's doing is it's massaging that vagus nerve. It's giving you all of these signals, through these various sensory experiences in your body. I am purposefully moving my body, for my own health. And that sensation goes up through the vagus nerve into the brain, and it just tells your body, like, everything is good right now. There's no danger. We're safe. We're doing this for ourselves. So there's a huge mental health component to, syncing your body and your mind through purposeful movement. And mindfulness, I'm almost starting to think that the term mindfulness is kind of getting stolen, from its true roots, like Kleenex or Xerox, like a Kleenex really is a tissue, but everybody calls it a Kleenex because the brand became like more popular than the actual word. So I think mindfulness is kind of going through that, where everybody has this idea of what mindfulness is, and it may not, really match like the rooted definition, because mindfulness gets attached to meditation a lot, and meditation like is a practice of mindfulness, but mindfulness doesn't like need meditation, primarily. Like mindfulness is something you can practice daily. You can practice it, going out for a walk or at work or at the grocery store or driving. Mindfulness is like a state of mind. Meditation in and of itself, I think, gets this sort of barrier where, we see these pictures of people in like the lotus position, where they have one of their legs kind of folded up almost into their lap. And it doesn't take these special extreme positions to meditate. Meditation can be done standing, sitting, laying. How about grabbing a meditation while you're sitting at a red light? Totally possible that you could, take a small break just waiting for the light to turn green. So this like mystique that has developed around meditation of sitting on the mountainside and having this kind of folded, style of sitting, is almost like a disservice to the practice because it doesn't take that. It's much, much more simplified than I think some people expect. You can meditate anywhere. All meditation really is like returning to the present moment. Our mind kind of runs away with these stories, and it's always keeping busy with some thought, and a lot of times with trauma, especially, that thought is some reflection on something that's very difficult to remember. So the technique of returning to the present moment is sort of clearing and calming down the noise of all of those thoughts. And then, of course, the process starts again because inevitably we're human and that's what humans do. But then just reminding yourself, oh, I started that whole line of thinking and story again. Let me just return to breathing and relaxing and kind of being in this present moment and not in a past memory or a story. But importantly, not judging yourself for it either. Like if your mind raced off like a squirrel, now it's going down memory lane, don't punish yourself for that. Just be like, oh, it happened and I'm here to practice just returning to that present moment and relaxing and breathing. So, what it does is you can begin stopping these repetitive stories that start because you create the space of awareness of it. You're no longer just like stuck inside the story. You're actually stepping outside of it a little bit and kind of looking at the story from a perch where you can start to think about it objectively. Like, where did this story come from? Why am I thinking about it? And catching these internal narratives, like I can give you an example. I was at a grocery store once, and I had, looking through the vegetable aisle, I knocked a carrot like off onto the floor. And, your first reaction is embarrassment, right? Because now it's like, do you pick it up and put it back? Do you leave it on the floor? Do you kick it? Like under, like what do you do? Like there's no really right way to fix it. So it's kind of like a conundrum. But I heard this, and I say here, I mean, I didn't auditorily hear somebody say this, but my mind said, you always do this. And it was so like just groundbreaking for me because it was the first time I really caught the process of my self-criticism, that I have this like self-criticism filter that everything goes to and like turns into like a fault, a shame, or a blame. Like I had this mindful awareness of my present moment enough that I stopped and said, whoa, what was that? And I started exploring, like, how often does that happen? Like, what situations does it happen in? And I practiced myself out of it, like starting to give myself a bigger break. So now if I drop a cup and it breaks all over the kitchen floor and I got to sweep it up, I'm kind of like, well, that happened. It doesn't have to be like a self-punishment, because that's a human thing to do. We drop cups. So yeah, meditation is like silencing the noise of your mind, finding that inner experience, recognizing feelings that come up and patterns and reincorporating those feelings, thanks for being so alert all the time. That really helped me through my life. But now that level of alertness is actually like exhausting me. Like I need it to change, but also the gratitude that it got me where I was. And ultimately giving that limbic system a break. Like it got us here, right? It did its job. It got us to where we can finally stop and say, what in the heck was all that about? Now is the time to reflect, but we sort of have to turn our limbic system down in order to do it. A great way to approach mindfulness and meditation is through VR communities, believe it or not. There is a mindfulness VR community that is just absolutely wonderful. It has guided meditations like every day in VR. And to me, guided meditation is really a great way to start because there's nothing more boring and uncomfortable to me than sitting like in my living room floor on a cushion and just trying to create that space like I'm talking about. But when you have a practitioner in a community that's sort of walking you through it and you're all there for a communal purpose, it completely changes the landscape. And, there's also local groups. If you go like on a social media platform and type in events, you can find meditation groups that are by you that might meet, weekly and also have lots of tips. And, lastly, be aware of the McMindfulness trend. This mindfulness idea of healing and being able to kind of calm yourself, it got really trendy, like a trendy self-help, self-improvement. So you have all kinds of books and classes and, YouTube videos that you can get behind a paywall. And if it helps, that's good. I'm not here to knock, that pathway to mindfulness, but I also think a lot of people are just trying to profit, from the trend and, aren't really there to help in a wholesome way. So relationships and support, let's kind of talk about this a little bit too, because, we're wired to be social. Like our wiring, our biology is attuned to being connected to one another. And we connect through attachment styles. And when you have a trauma, your attachment style can be like disorganized or anxious attachment style, and it really interferes and interrupts relationships. So, another part of mindfulness and, purposeful movement and calming down that limbic system is you sort of gain like an awareness of these attachment styles and how we react in relationships. And it can be really insightful to relational patterns and conflict. And when you can overcome that and really be present and attuned with like another person or a group of people, like it is a whole new world when you meet like mindful, kind, people that are also, supportive and compassionate. And it's a really a whole new world, a whole new life when you're able to find, friendship and compassion in that way. And of course, one of the extreme barriers to that is traumatic forms of neglect and abandonment or even abuse. When you've had a caregiver like literally be the reason for your trauma, it can lead you down the thought process of, if I can't even trust like my caregiver in this world, like who in the world can I trust? It kind of creates this narrative that if the one person in this world that's supposed to care for me like doesn't or doesn't care for me properly or even maliciously harms me, what kind of world is this, that if that's allowed to happen? And, our young minds don't understand that people are, there's all different kinds of people, like there's mentors and sometimes parents' friends can be even more of a parent than somebody's, primary caregiver. So it can be very discouraging early in life if the primary caregiver like didn't fully show up, and it can be a barrier to finding true connection and relationship. So that's another thing to kind of consider navigating the pathway to healing. And of course, professional therapy. This is for sure a way to kind of get professional validation that you may have a trauma, or explanation of like how that trauma impacted your life. That they can sort of help unwind it and go through a lot of these concepts like personally tailored to your experience. Another thing they can do is help bring that stabilizing calm to your life, where, you might have been living in crisis mode for many years, and they know the techniques to sort of bring you out of that crisis and create a pathway out of it. Addressing reenactment behaviors, traumatic triggering, and reconnecting patients with relationships. If a relationship is helpful, but it's been lost, because of traumatic behavior, professionals can sometimes repair those relationships, reconnect. But counselors and therapists, they're people too, so you can sometimes have some concerns about, like if, your very first appointment, they're prescribing you a medication, that can be a sign that they're getting kickbacks from drug companies, and you're kind of just in the process of them collecting medication fees. Not to say medication isn't the right way to go, but like if it's the first appointment and they're writing you a script already, wow, maybe. If you ever hear somebody say like, I'm the only one that can fix you, that's kind of sketchy. Or isn't it time you just get over it? We kind of talked about this, that advice to just stopping the behavior. It's like, yeah, that's not what I needed to hear. Like, I need to understand the nuances of what I'm experiencing and why. And just feelings of generally being unproductive or uncomfortable. Like, good therapy has moments of discomfort, especially if you have to face something or remember something more clearly or differently. So you don't want to just run from discomfort, but if you got the heebie-jeebies, if you're just not feeling right, that's a sign. Because survivors of trauma, kind of have sometimes a people-pleasing kind of a way of survival. And that can also mean sticking with a counselor that's not helping. So try to recognize that and trust what your body's telling you. That's part of the path. I like to describe therapists as almost like, friendships or relationships. You stay connected with that counselor, as long as it's productive and helping. A really great place to find counselors is this website called Psychology Today. It has this wonderful search mechanism where you can type in your location, but also filter by types of practice. And one of the ones I really like is Somatic, because that's a counselor that studied the vagus nerve. And really the only reason to study the vagus nerve in a mental health capacity is because they've deep dive, understand trauma. So I love checking that box and finding counselors that have that kind of humanist, somatic, practice. Attunement therapy, this is another thing that Dr. van der Kolk mentions is, if you're depraved of attunement at a young age, we remember the anecdote where the young child was kind of banging their head against the wall in front of Dr. van der Kolk, and the mom just said, "Oh, he's just doing that to bug me." That is such a misattunement of the parent-child relationship. And if you grow up with that, you lack the understanding of how do you be present with somebody. How do you read the signs that somebody wants to play or somebody wants your attention or to have a conversation. So there's all kinds of therapies animal therapies, like the young lady that went and cared for a horse, and for the first time in her life, she experienced another being being excited to see her. There's even parent-child attunement classes that are supervised, and it's taught this is how to connect. But to kind of give a little bit of an idea of the power of attunement, the study out of World War II is that children that were separated from their parents, but moved to places of safety out of the way of the bombs, out in the countryside, but separated from their parents, actually did worse than the kids that went through the bombing, but stayed with their parents. So just think about that for a moment. The kids that had bombs raining down on them, but were with their parents, actually did better than the ones that were sent away and separated. That's just really powerful statement for how important the primary caregiver is to our development. Massage, this is an amazing way to reconnect, because not only is it physically healthy, But that touch, like that sense of touch, it reconnects us with our mind body experience. So if there's any way to be able to afford massage therapy, it's a great thing to regularly practice to get attuned and start the healing path. And lastly, there's a couple of other techniques that he mentioned in the book, and I felt like the presentation would probably go too long. But later on, I think he dives into each of these a little deeper. So we're not going to miss anything, but there are a couple ones I didn't include. But I did want to include EMDR because it's getting really popular. If you Google it, there will be an EMDR practitioner like in your vicinity. It's almost kind of like a hack. Like they've found this technique where if I kind of describe it in a highly summarized term here, is like you really think about like this thing that happened to you. You don't even have to tell the practitioner, and in fact they don't even really ask. They just say, this thing that keeps coming to you, like I want you to bring it up, to bring every part of it like into your attention, the memory, the feeling. And then they do this eye movement technique, and something about the way it works like establishes that it's in the past, that it's happened, and it's like tells your amygdala that's an event that started and stopped. So it sort of trains your amygdala to stop thinking that that's happening again and again. And I don't really know the science or the details behind it, and I haven't tried it myself. But this is something that has, evidence of being effective, and I just haven't had any friends or family or myself experience it yet to know more. And our inspiration for the day is mindful or mindful. I thought that might be appropriate to our discussion. And speaking of discussion, here we are at our open discussion section. So yeah, looking for any hand raises where anybody wants to share. I see George Braham up there first. If you'd like to start us off, floor is all yours. I'll send the camera over to you.
Yes. The one picture, it appears our brains are full of bean pods. So that confirms my suspicion that we have been plants all along. But on a more serious note, what is fawning? I've never heard of that as a trauma response.
Yeah, that's a really good question. One way to think of it is almost kind of like love bombing somebody. If you react to somebody's like anger, for example, by like showering them with praise to kind of calm them down or gain like a little bit of control in the situation. So there's not necessarily like a genuineness to it, right? Like you're sort of showering somebody with compliments, like in order to mask like an awkward situation or even like avoid harm. It can happen at like work a lot too, with boss and subordinate dynamics. Sometimes bosses, they want to be adored, so they kind of set up situations where they can collect compliments. So if you think of fawning in that way, like in that territory, that's kind of the concept of it.
I really, really hope that gets like incorporated into those fear responses, because that is like, yeah, that now that you mention it, like my mind is just awash with like, wow, I see that so much. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, great question. And thanks for bringing it up, because it is one of the newer, that I think everybody's heard of fight, flight, and freeze is kind of a bit newer too. But yeah, fawning very rarely kind of gets attached to it. So yeah, thanks for bringing that question up. I'm sure a lot of people were wondering. And yeah, KT, I see your hand up there. If it's okay, I'll send the camera over.
Yeah, George, I would answer that question with it's like people pleasing. Fawning is like an extreme form of people pleasing, so that if your parent beat you, if you engaged in a lot of people pleasing behaviors, like he said, like fawning, like bringing compliments, but also handling tasks for them or bringing them sweets or whatever, so that they won't beat you. You're trying to persuade them that you are not a threat. And so people pleasing is another way to think about that. But what I put my hand up for was EMDR, which I have experienced. And it is very effective. From what I understand from my research, it's very effective for single traumas. It's very fast for single traumas like car wreck or something like that, a one-time event. It is more difficult to get the same response with complex trauma, or with a series of smaller traumas, which is a lot of what we're also talking about here. With that, you have to work on each of those little traumas instead, and so it just takes longer, and you don't get the sort of like I exaggerate, but you don't get the overnight effects you do with one big trauma that you're trying to deal with. But what it felt like was that it allowed you to remember painful memories without getting the painful physical responses. So you could think of it and stay active in your forebrain, in your control centers, and you wouldn't be swamped with emotion after you go through it. And it's sort of the desensitization part of that is part of what happens in a safe container, in a place where the therapist gives you a lot of resources for managing the emotions and helps you with it. Then there's something about stimulation of both sides of your brain. And so the eye movement, they'll use a light bar. Whoops. Let me get back over here. A light bar that goes back and forth, and your eye is supposed to track it. And if they don't have the light bar, they'll like put up 2 fingers and do it that way. But they can also do it with tones in each ear. And so the tones go back and forth, which is why you see the binaural beats a lot of times on YouTube. And so it can be that way. It can also be a physical feeling, like you hold devices that buzz, and so it buzzes in one hand, then it buzzes in the other, buzzes in this hand, it buzzes, and so it's something about bilateral stimulation of the brain, which helps you to sort of rewrite that memory, if you will. You don't lose the memory, but you don't have the emotional reaction to it, and you have a lot of resources for managing your emotions should you get a flooding emotional response. It takes a while to set up, because like I said, the therapist will start with giving you those resources, like a safe place in your imagination, or thinking of it as a train ride. So you see whatever the event is that you're remembering from the distance, and you just sort of pass by like you're in a train. So there's several a number of resources they can use to help retrieve you if you get flooded with emotion. And then they check at the beginning of each session how much the particular memory you're working on affects you, and then they'll go through the bilateral stimulation. And as the book said, you don't even have to tell them exactly what you're seeing or feeling. It's just, what is this bringing up for you? But you don't have to give them the details of it. And then they check again at the end of the session for how triggered you feel. And they keep working on that memory until after the after check-in, is a much, much lower response. So your anxiety level or your emotional level is down around a 1 instead of a 10. And so I think it was a pretty effective technique. I don't think I've seen things on YouTube where you can do EMDR on yourself, and I don't think that's wise. I think you need to do it under the guidance of a therapist who's trained in doing this, has experience in doing it. But it can be very, very successful. It would just take a while if you're dealing with lots of small t traumas. And so that's just what I wanted to share.
I appreciate that. I've read articles about it, and I've seen different YouTubes like explaining it. But I've never actually had somebody who's had it administered, like describe it, yeah, that was really valuable because now I feel like I understand it, even more. And yeah, like I kind of love that idea of integrating like both sides of the brain, like with the experience, because I think from reading the book and the different types of research on it, it's like a traumatic experience like really sort of goes to a specific area of the brain. Like our limbic system is highly engaged. Like we have this kind of brain state that trauma triggers. And that echo of the trauma is what kind of keeps happening, which is the traumatic experiencing. Is like every time something reminds us of that memory, your brain like returns to that state of like this disorganized, kind of distressed dysfunction. And I think like the goal of EMDR is to like purposefully bring that memory to the surface, that very triggering, like difficult, kind of want to push it away memory, and engage in an activity that like brings the other parts of your brain like online, like,
Yeah.
so that you can look at this experience from like your fully functioning like presence. And so like, yeah, that would be invaluable, right? Is to sort of, it's almost like the memory takes your brain hostage and and makes it panic in a way that can't escape. But it's like the assistance to be like, oh, you're not actually in danger. They're not holding you as tightly as you thought. Like, yeah, so that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear
There's
that.
some really good research on its effectiveness with soldiers and PTSD. And other kinds of trauma as well, but there's been a lot of research in particular done with veterans.
Yeah, and I love to hear that too, because like we talked about, many times in the events that, trauma happens in all form, but, our veterans come back with like very extreme and sustained versions of these memories. And like you were mentioning, individual traumas being so different than complex traumas. When you have multiple traumas kind of stacked up on top of each other, you hit that healing path and you're like, all right, like which one is it? Is it too overlapping this time? It's just so much harder to kind of get the your arms around it if you have all these multiple sources of getting re-triggered. So I'm so happy to hear it's effective for veterans as well. Yeah, and let's see, today I didn't see any comments on the stream there, and yeah, we got a little bit of a smaller group today too, so we may have run the extent of everything that's going to be shared, but I just like to leave a little bit of an opening before we close in case somebody was holding a comment or something popped up from EMDR or fawning about being a plant. Yeah, do a little.
Me and
going
Sim
once.
are very grounded.
I can see you there. I can see you planted in the ground. And but yeah, going once, going twice there. And if that's a wrap for this week, we'll be back here next Thursday with chapter 14. So really looking forward to diving in deeper. I appreciate everybody being here.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. I'll put our audio back on normal here too, so we're not megaphoned.
Hey T,
Mhm.
so I have a question. Like, uh, one thing that got me a little curious was like EMDR seems to be something more towards sudden traumas, with like a very short-lived